Before we get this episode going, I'd like to ask you to accept our apologies up front. We are new to the podcast game and COVID has forced us to get stories any way we can. So that means some of our audio quality varies throughout the podcast. Other than that, enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to the Talking Through the Miraculous podcast. My name is Errin Brownstone, and I'll be co-hosting this podcast with my brother BJ. Now, this is episode 2, and I'll be sharing a significant miracle that happened in my life. It's a short story, but I'm so grateful that God intervened. So about 19 years ago, I remember thinking, I'm about to have my baby and I want to spend some time with my niece. I had recently moved to Riverside, so I didn't get to spend much time with my niece and my nephews. So we went to the house, I picked her up, we drove to Riverside, and on the way home we stopped at the store and I picked up some crayons. And she was a little thing, so I picked up the thick crayons, the ones for like kindergartners. And she was coloring at the table, and we heard a crayon fall. I was kind of confused why she was so upset, and when I looked down at the crayon, I saw that the crayon had shattered. It totally shattered. I found that kind of shocking. But cut to about 2 months later, and I just had my son Jordan, and I spent probably the first week or 2 weeks upstairs in the bedroom. I didn't venture out. I was very mama bear, very protective of him. I remember there was a time when his dad had gone back to work and the house was quiet, and I decided that I would venture out of the room and take him downstairs. I'm walking down the stairs, and for some reason, this had never happened before and it never happened afterwards, the cat walked right under my feet. She walked between my feet, and I was trying to be really careful. I got to the point where I was going to take a step, and I fell. I fell down the stairs, holding my newborn baby, who was not even 2 weeks old. The only thing I had in my mind was how that crayon shattered when my niece had dropped it. I'm thinking, Lord, what's going to happen? Am I going to fall on the baby? Am I going to squash him? Is his head going to shatter like the crayons? But somehow, when I stopped falling and I arrived at the bottom of the stairs on the tile floor, I was cradling his head, and his head was just inches from the tile. I didn't fall on top of him, and the Lord spared his life and spared my life, because I don't know where I would be if something like that happened. So that's probably one of the biggest miracles I've ever experienced in my life. Praise God for miracles. And by the way, no cats were harmed in the performance of my miracle. In fact, that particular cat lived about 18 or 19 years.
Erin's doing a good job. I had to step in here so you guys don't forget about me. Anyway, the next story is from Mike. This story makes you really realize the importance of having true friends.
Hello everyone, my name is Mike. This story weighs heavy on my heart. There's many that I can cover. This one is probably the worst one that's ever hit me in my life. And I had to pray on this because it's what people think about once they hear you give a testimony. I met my wife back in 1993. She stated to me that she didn't want to marry me because we weren't equally yoked, and I didn't understand what that meant. So she opened up the Bible to the book of 2 Corinthians 6:14, which is the letter that Paul wrote to the Corinthians. It says, "Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers." I believed in God, but I didn't have a relationship with God. I knew who He was, but I didn't really know who He was. Well, God had blessed me with a woman of my heart's desire. We had 3 beautiful and healthy kids. I had a great and wonderful job that I never thought I could ever have. And I had a home that I never thought that I could afford. And through all this, I see that this was a blessing from God. But then tragedy hit my life in 2006, and everything that I had was gone. My wife was gone. My 3 kids were gone. I lost my career, lost my home. I lost the friends that I had in my career. That tragedy ended up building to even be worse. I ended up in a place where I would never want to see somebody end up, and that was in prison. And even though then God was still there, as King David wrote in the book of Psalms 139:8, if I make my bed in hell, behold, you were there. My bed was literally made in hell, and God was there. God has sent people that I didn't even know that you look up at and you'd be afraid of in the prison system. One person that he sent to me was a man by the name of Mo, serving 40 years for a crime he didn't even commit. He walked up to me. If anybody knows the story of King David and Goliath, that's just how I felt. Here's this big guy looking over me, and he said he had a vision, a dream, that God told him to look over me. And he says normally he doesn't do that. And through the time of my incarceration, he was there looking over for me, always checking on me and making sure that things were fine for me. And not one person or one dilemma that I ever faced in that system, which is a very ugly place to be. Things that I saw, things that I heard, and witnessing the tragedy of things that go on in prison. I went unscathed. God protected me there. It's like he just laid an edge of protection, a big shield over me. Well, when I returned to society, there's one thing I want to say. Mo and I still keep in contact today. He's out now and he's doing fine, and God has opened many doors for him and blessed him. He's 70 years old. He still has good health, and he has a degree in psychology. Everything is going great for him, and this is by the grace of God. When he went out, he found him a home, a church, and he's doing good. That's one thing, though, when I returned back to society, I thought things would get better, but every friend that I lost and turned their back on me wouldn't even talk to me. But there was one individual and his wife that did. His name is Byron Brown. He was in an earlier podcast on this, as well as his wife. I was told that I didn't have a retirement. I had no money. I was making $900 a month, living between my brother's house and sleeping in my car in a Walmart parking lot. And I was depressed, the verge of committing suicide once again after my other 3 attempts that I did. And God blessed me through that as well. I should be dead. But Byron stepped up and says, give me a few days. A few days it took him, and he called me back and he says, hey man, give this phone number and call it. Come to find out I had a retirement. God uses people. His voice comes through people. His actions come through people. Not only does his book give you guidance and you hear his voice through his word, he uses people. If he can make a donkey talk, he can sure enough make humans talk. So I'm back financially stable. Never thought I would ever see the day of light again. I wasn't at the bottom of the barrel. The bottom of the barrel was on me, and God lifted this weight of this barrel off of my back by sending his children to me. Byron and Moana Brown. They have been compassionate and loving to me, so I joined the church that they were in. People that I lost never came back, but people that I gained that heard my testimony never turned their back on me. They showed the loving kindness, the non-judgmental, the outreach hands to help, but the key word was not judging me. So I have a new family, I have new friends, and this is where it comes to paying God back by listening to him and going out there and doing for others as he has used others to do for me. Paying it forward to people. God is real. I still have struggles and I still go through things, but God is there opening doors daily for me. He closes the doors behind me and opens the new ones in front of me, giving me hope, a better future, a better path to walk on. An uplifting spirit that I never thought I would ever have again. So please, if you're listening to this, know that God is real, knowing that he can do anything for you as well as he has done for me. He can move the mountains that are in your way. He can close the doors to keep you from going back to the things, and he can open the doors in front of you to let you see that there's a new light, a new way. Trust in him. Put your faith in him. He is real. I thank you for listening. I hope this will help somebody. And I hope to be back on here to tell you many other stories that I went through that God has helped me through.
Brother Mike, that was an amazing miracle. You know, we don't look like what we've been through, and we can only attribute that to God.
This next God story takes place a little more recently. Karen explains how we can be blessed even in a pandemic.
and I want to share a miracle that God provided to me during the midst of COVID-19. Before COVID broke out, I was at a job that I was just unbelievably miserable at. Many times I would come home crying, wanting to quit, no direction as to where God would want me. I'd look and look and look, probably for about 2 years, and nothing opened up. So when March 2020 hit and businesses were forced to close, the current company that I was at furloughed all of its employees. Of course, the unknown was questionable. If we didn't go back to work, where were we going to work? No one knew how long it would last. But while I was furloughed, I started to detox and find myself again. Found what I loved to do, what brought me joy, which was being with my family, cooking for my family. And I just really began to cherish the time off, so much so I didn't want to go back to work. Not at that company, but I needed the money. So I was like, what am I going to do if they ask me back when this is over? I didn't want to go, but I had to go. Didn't know what else to do. So I kept praying and praying. And in June of 2020, they decided not to bring 5 of us back. And I was one of the 5 that they did not bring back. Of course, I was excited they didn't bring me back, but I still didn't know what I was going to do. Then one day I got a text from a friend who said she knew of a job, someone who was retiring at a hospital who did the same thing that we were doing at our previous place of employment. And I never felt qualified. I think the company that I had worked for so many years had just made me feel so small. I didn't believe that I could be worthy of organizing a whole hospital CME program. So anyway, on a whim, I contacted the person who was going to retire. She asked me to send over my resume, my cover letter, and go from there. So of course, as many of you know, during COVID-19, in the beginning stages of it, we all got the extra $600 a week. So my finances were okay, but that was due to end August 1st. Well, in the meantime, I interviewed, and part of the problem with my interview was I'm currently getting my master's to be a marriage and family therapist. So my longevity at working anywhere wasn't going to be very long, maybe another year, year and a half. So when I interviewed at this hospital, that was one of the first questions they asked. Well, why should we hire you? Why would you want to work here when you can make more money as a therapist? And I was honest with them. I just said, I'm not in this for the money. I just feel that's the right direction to go. I can't promise you I'll be here 5 years, but I can promise you I'll be here at least a year. I took a gamble on that because I figured during COVID to have someone come into a hospital with full training on my particular area of expertise was very difficult. I was offered the job. I was offered the job at higher pay, much higher pay than I was before, with full benefits, which I did not have before. And I started July 31st, the last day that the $600 a week was available. So that was a blessing in disguise in and of itself. The culture was better. The pay was better. I got to work from home 3 days a week as a brand new employee. On top of that, there's been a lot of controversy with how long COVID would last, getting vaccinated. Are vaccines safe? Are they not? I do not work with patients, nor do I see patients or have anything to do with patients. And so when the vaccine came out, I knew I was going to be bottom of the totem pole. On Thursday, our hospital started vaccinating the physicians. Now, I only work 2 days per week. I work Tuesday and Wednesday. So I was home when they started the vaccinations. By the time I came in on Tuesday, I hadn't seen my email yet, but they opened up vaccinations to all employees of the hospital. They had gotten a shipment large enough for everybody. And I was contemplating whether I should or not. Like everybody else, I have my fears, concerns. I was also hearing all the positives, working around physicians at a hospital and all that. And I remember calling my mom and I said, Mom, I'm not sure, but I think I'm going to get it. My mom just said, you know what? You walked into a rainbow. You walked into a job with a better culture, higher pay, and now in the midst of a pandemic, you get to be first in line for the vaccine. And I thought, God, what a miracle. A few years ago when I was miserable looking for jobs, I couldn't even imagine being trusted with a position like this. I certainly couldn't have imagined getting the pay that I'm getting paid right now. And Who would have ever imagined a pandemic, and let alone being first in line to get the vaccination when I don't even work with patients? So that's my little miracle of what God has done for me in the midst of COVID. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that are still struggling during this time. And I just want to let you know that although the blessings have come to me in this regard during this time frame of COVID, I have had many years of struggle where it's been painful, where there's been loss of jobs, where there's been no insurance. Matter of fact, before I got this job, I had 5 years of no insurance. So I get it. I get it if you're listening and you're saying, but I get the but. I just want to encourage you to hold on, even if your faith is small, that what God has promised you, He will bring forth. Thank you for listening to my miracle story.
I have an update to Karen's story. Shortly after the recording, Karen found out that her in-laws tested positive for COVID. Because of her new job, she was able to get them infused with the new process that helps build immunity. Now her blessing is a blessing to others.
Now get ready. This next miracle from Brother DJ, you gotta hear it.
Hi, my name is DJ. You know, when you think about the goodness of God, there are so many things that I know God has blessed me with, but this particular thing that I want to share was a miracle that happened not only for me, but it was actually for my family. In 2015, I was on a 4th of July weekend to Lau Creek up in the San Bernardino mountains a little bit. I went there with the mission of just having fun. The 4th of July weekend, we were gonna have a good time and do fishing. Everybody knows that when you go up to Lau Creek or anytime you go into the mountains, one thing that you lose is creature comforts like cell phone, Wi-Fi. So, because everybody's basically thinking about relaxing and having fun and family and everything. So while we were up at the creek fishing, it was something kind of funny because that day before I even went up there, I had just bought a new cell phone. Because it was new and I had it in my pocket, I didn't think nothing of it because I knew that it wasn't gonna work. So we were fishing, me and two of my buddies. All of a sudden, we heard this weird sound. And, like, wow, where is this sound coming from? And everybody's looking around, looking at the fishing bag, and I looked, and it was coming from my pocket. It was my cell phone. I didn't even recognize the ring because it was a brand new phone. I didn't even think it would be working. And everybody's like yelling at me, why you got your phone on? You seeing us fishing? We're scaring the fish. And I didn't think nothing of it. I grabbed the phone. I said, man, I didn't think it was working. But when I answered the phone, I found out that it was my mother. My mother was calling me. I said, wow. I said, what's going on? She was telling me that there was an emergency that happened at my home. And mind you, I'm in California and my mother is in Virginia. So this was really, really some important news. I said, what's going on? She says, your dad, he had an accident. He slipped into a diabetic coma and is in intensive care right now. And the prognosis is not good. They only giving them 2 days to live. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? For one thing, my dad didn't even have any kind of diabetes. He never had any health issues like that or anything. So I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense. He had some surgery for other things prior to that, and he was on medication and he was being observed, but the medication that he was on wasn't anything will put him into a diabetic state. So this was like really bizarre. So I said to my mother on the phone that my father would live and not die. I said, put the phone to his ear. And I just began to pray over my father and command the spirit of death to be broken and bound in the name of Jesus. And me and my friends and the family that was with me, we all came together in agreement. And we bind the power of darkness over my father, that he would live and not die. To shorten the story, in the 2 days that they said my father was gonna die, he actually came out of the coma. 4 days, I was in Virginia with him. And when I walked into the room, they were doing a observation to see what effect that the coma had over him. They was asking him, well, did you know who my mother was? And he said, no, my mother was his mother and my cousin was his sister. He knew who they were, but he couldn't pinpoint it because of the coma had bothered his short-term memory. But when I walked into the room, the doctor looked at me as I walked in, because I had just got off the plane directly to the hospital. They asked, do you know who he is? And my dad, with tears in his eyes, sat up and said, that's my bear, because of my size. That's the name he gave me. And we all say, because where I came from, he knew that I lived in California. If he sees me, that it was something serious. So his memory came back immediately. And with that in mind, again, the 2 days that they said he was gonna die, he came out of the coma. Mind you, my father was 72 years old. 3 years later, he was alive and well at 75, and to this day, he's 100% recovered. There's nothing wrong with him. When I got there, he was on 13 different types of medication. I left him 3 years later, fully recovered on 3 supplements. And now it's been over 7 years, and he's totally healed and whole in every way. So I give God the glory. That was a miracle in my life.
It's funny. We were sitting around and my brother just happened to say, DJ, do you have a miracle you want to share? And he was like, well, yeah, I guess I do. Our God is so good.
Well, that's it for our second episode. Our plan is to release episodes monthly until we can get more participation from people like you. If you'd like to contribute, send all stories to miraculouspodcast@gmail.com. That's miraculouspodcast@gmail.com. It would be awesome if you could record your story in a quiet place using your cell phone voice memo and email it to us. Or if you're local, I could come to you and record. We will also take written submissions. We do have a phone number, but it only has a 3-minute limit. That number is 909-491-3435. I'd like to give a special shout out to Mr. Dale, who contributed the track that we're listening to right now. All other music was provided by yours truly. Please like, comment, and subscribe to help this podcast grow. Thanks again for listening, and remember, miracles still happen.